We now call this meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee to order at 6 p.m. Please give your attention to the short video.
Matt, do you want me to run that? Or are you going to be able to run it? Okay, thank you.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. Terry Ann, can you please conduct roll call?
Yes, Member Banker.
Present.
Member Bristow.
Present.
Member Carr.
Here.
Member Esquivel. Thank you.
Present. Okay.
Thank you. Member Hammond.
Present.
Member Moriarty.
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Saunders.
Here.
Member Wayne.
Here.
Vice Chair Linder.
Present.
Chair Ash.
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum with members Chahal, Miller, Osuna, and Vega absent.
Great. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Terry Ann, have we received any public comment? Written public comment?
No, we have not received any written public comment, and it doesn't appear we have any public here at this time.
Okay, great. That concludes the public comment item. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar, which includes a summary of actions from the April 26th, 2023 meeting and acknowledgement of the member attendance log. Are there any changes or comments from the committee?
None.
Is there, Terry Ann, have we received any written public comments?
No written public comment.
And still nobody here?
No members
okay,
present.
do I have a motion and a second?
Motion to approve the minutes of last meeting.
I second it.
Great, so that was Rosa first and second by Patty. Terry Ann, please conduct a roll call vote and announce the outcome.
Member Banker.
Abstain.
Member Bristow.
Yes.
Member Carr.
Aye.
Member Esquivel.
Yes.
Member Hammond.
Aye.
Member Moriarty.
Approve.
Member Saunders.
Yes.
Member Wayne.
Yes.
Vice Chair Linder.
Yes.
Chair Ash.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously with members Chahal, Miller, Usana, and Vega absent, and member Bankert abstaining.
Great, we will now move to the regular agenda items. We have 3 items. The first item is an informational presentation on the State Route 4 Vision Study. I believe, John, you're going to take that away for us. So do you want to run with it? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for being here.
Good evening, Chair Ash. Thank you. And Citizen Advisory Committee members, John Huang, Director of Planning. Thanks for having us this evening and giving us the opportunity to present the State Route 4 Corridor Vision Study. We started actually scoping this project about a year ago, and the board approved us moving forward with the project in September last year. And since then, we've been presenting at various, a couple of our TPCs, the Transplan, the WICTAC, and then tomorrow we'll be presenting at the TransPAC, the Regional Transportation Planning Committees, the RTPCs. Just a brief introduction, and I'm going to hand over the heavy lifting to our consultant, Sasha Dansky. So the State Route 4 Vision Study is really looking at the whole corridor extending from Hercules in the West County to Discovery Bay in East County. We will be looking at all modes of transportation on the transportation network, not only on the main line, but also the parallel arterials. There'll be, as you know, there have been a number of studies over the past several years. The most recent study on or related to Highway 4 was the East County Integrated Transit Study, which was completed last year. And also we've done some State Route 4 design alternative analysis in 2021. So over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of studies, and what we try to do is leverage all that information and new information to feed into this vision study. Past several months, I've been focused on data gathering, working with the stakeholders and the various teams to define what the existing condition is. So with that, Sasha, again, have a more comprehensive presentation for you all. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sasha.
Great. Thanks very much, John. Chair and committee members, thanks very much for allowing us to come here today to present our project. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here, and hopefully that works. You can see my screen. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for letting me never quite know if it actually goes through or not. So yeah, as John mentioned, we're here to talk about the State Route 4 Vision Project. This project is to look at the entire length of Highway 4 to consider again, as John mentioned, all modes of transportation. The project purpose is to develop what we call a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan, a CMCP. It is important. We've structured the study to meet the requirements of the CMCP, and we've worked with Caltrans to confirm that the scope of what we're doing will meet the requirements of the CMCP. This is really important as there are a number of SB1 funded projects that or category types that require a CMCP to be in place in order to be eligible for funding to fund those future projects. And so we base this on the CMCP guidelines for each one of these various modes, including emerging technology. So as John mentioned, the study really builds upon existing efforts. There's been a lot of study. We want to utilize that and really use that as the basis going forward. So we've gone through and we've looked at, and I have Sam Sharvini here with me today, who I may call on to add a little bit of clarity on a few things, but we've studied, I think, more than we've collected and gone through more than 80 different planning documents along this corridor. And this is the DAA that John mentioned. It's the State Route 4 Operational Improvement Project. It's the city bike plans, county bike plan, all these various elements. We are also doing some additional analysis, recognizing there's a few gaps in some of the projects. Number one being corridor safety. We have integrated work that was from the original Northern Waterfront study to look at freight movement within the corridor. We've also are looking at arterial operations, those that are parallel to Highway 4 or and within the study area. And then again, we're looking at emerging technologies as well as part of this, both from a communication standpoint as well as from infrastructure standpoint. We worked to establish an evaluation criteria, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And then we're going to go through a primary screening for, 80 different studies with lots and lots of different elements and different projects. We're distilling those down into projects that are relevant to the CMCP. We are then going to do a primary screening, and then based upon additional analysis, do a secondary screening in order to develop and identify the set of projects that will form the vision for the Highway 4 as we go forward. And as you can see, once we're completed with that, we intend to leverage this vision that meets the requirements of the CMCP to get money to fund these projects. As part of our project, we have both a project team as well as a technical advisory committee that has members from throughout the corridor limits. And so we have the technical team, and then we have the technical team being the PDT, which is the consultants and CCTA staff, and some Caltrans staff, and then the technical advisory committee, which are the local jurisdictions, regional partners being like MTC and the transit agencies. So they're giving us input on the project as well. So in terms of developing the goals for the project, we have identified here sort of to define the long-term vision. We need to establish a evaluation criteria for the various projects. And then we've developed a set of performance objectives and project objectives and performance measures to be able to kind of understand how we're going to evaluate them. And that was included in your packet. You can see the various goals. There's 7 goals that are again in line with the CMCP, and how we've applied weighting factors to those various goals that then carry through with the performance measures and objectives. So maybe I lied. I think I said 80. I think there's 79 documents that we've gone through as part of the corridor work. We have identified projects throughout the project study area, and you can see the bounding of the study area is this blue area here. We've identified from that 87 projects that were identified that sort of meet the criteria of what we're looking at, and you can see the basic breakdown of those projects: vehicular, transit, active transportation, multimodal, and goods movement, that we've included in our set of project lists. And then we've gone through and actually begun to plot out where those are and what type of project they are. That's the background. So that's really leveraging the work that's been done. The next thing that we're doing is, again, we talked about the additional analysis that we're doing. So we've taken a good hard look at traffic safety. Looking at both Highway 4 and the parallel trails. So I forget the TIMS data is available data on traffic accidents and reported accidents. TASTIS data is within the state freeway. So we've combined those two. We're looking at the collisions in terms of segments along the corridor, so we can identify essentially hotspots of traffic collisions. And then identifying those, based upon the traffic volumes, which ones have the high collision rates that we should be focused in on. We've also done extensive freight system analysis, and this has been a really interesting part of the study to kind of understand the traffic, the goods movement trips that are taking place within the corridor. Bless you. So approximately 50, as it states here, 50% of the trips, truck goods movement trips, begin or end outside of the county. So maybe a truck that is going from a distribution center in Richmond, going to Solano or Sacramento or someplace in Alameda County, or the reverse, a trip coming from those regions into the county. You can see the distribution of where those trips are, where their origins and destinations are. And so we see a really heavy hotspot in Richmond with all the distribution, and then the second area within the Port Chicago area as well. And then, other, Crockett and Antioch also sharing a fair amount of the good movement. One thing that was interesting as part of our study, we've looked at kind of where the routing of trucks goes. So regardless of where the origin destinations are, where are trucks actually, what routes are they using? And what we've actually found is Highway 4 is not a preferred truck route, except for trucks that are beginning or ending along it. And that the primary truck route to those destinations in and out of the county are actually along 680 and 580 or along 80 up into Solano County. So that's been an interesting finding of our work. In terms of arterial network operations, we're looking at, again, you can see the plotted parallel arterials along the corridor. These are the major routes of significance. We've done it through a number of technical ways of being able to sort that information and be able to identify it. You can see that the primary reasons for poor operations along the arterials being the land use context, sort of a mismatch of the infrastructure and the land use, schools, things of that nature. Proximity to freeway interchanges. Just where you have freeway interchanges, you tend to have a lot of congestion along those arterials. And then areas where the freeway is congested, we have bypass traffic that gets onto the arterials and then congests those. And the majority of the problematic segments, which goes to reason, is between 242 and Lone Tree Way along that stretch of Highway 4 for most of the arterials. Emerging technologies. So this has been an interesting part of the study. So some of the technologies that we've kind of been identified are the use of LiDAR for pedestrian detection and for autonomous vehicles, enhanced wireless services, including enhanced cellular, Wi-Fi, as well as the connected vehicle systems. We are leveraging the CCTA concept of operations for the interoperable corridor management system, as well as recognizing the fact that the county is developing a county-wide fiber optic network. Through all this analysis, we're going to identify additional problematic areas. So where we see safety, congestion that are otherwise unaddressed by the set of project lists that we have pulled out, we will identify additional projects to be considered as part of the vision study. And we're going to, I think that's the second bullet is basically what I just said. We're going to use that analysis also to suggest strategies in order to meet the goals and objectives, sort of higher level, and then also use this analysis to support, as we go through the primary and secondary screening, to be able to sort the various projects in terms of their effectiveness. CMCPs are very intensive projects relative to stakeholder outreach. It's a really important part of it. So we've been working with CCTA staff to develop and implement a stakeholder outreach and public engagement process. The guidelines suggest a broad range of the various stakeholders that can be outreached to. And so our actual engagement approach, again, as I mentioned, is going to be led by CCTA, but includes leveraging pop-up events, public meetings like this, and as well as various other CCTA committees. We have a project website in development right now. When we talk about market research, there's been focus studies that CCTA has been heavily invested in, particularly along the Highway 4 corridor. We plan to use that to be able to test out certain ideas and the public's acceptance or rejection or feelings about some of the findings that we have on our. And then we're going to be presenting to the TAC, this committee, CCTA Planning Committee, and the CCTA board. And we intend to, for the latter three, the committees and the board, come to you twice. Once to kind of tell you about the project, and then once again later this fall when we have our solutions to come back to you. Our schedule, as I mentioned, two rounds. We're here today on May 24th. We intend to be back to you in the fall timeframe in October after we've done our analysis. We intend to go back to our TAC with the first round and first cut of that draft before we come back to you. So as we wrap this up and hopefully keeping you guys awake before your dinner, we're looking to gather feedback on sort of the work that we've done, the approach that we're taking, the goals and objectives as we have them. Once we have collected that information, we're going to be engaging in our primary and secondary screening, which will allow us to select essentially the short list of projects that will go into that vision in terms of implementation. And then we're going to come back to you all to wrap it up and tell you about what we found. With that, this is my name and my email address if there are questions. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. Now we'll go to comments from the committee. Comments or questions? Anybody want to go first? Chris, you see you there?
Thank you. Chris Saunders from Moraga. I have two questions. One I think is pretty simple, and then one that might be more involved. So just how long are these studies looking at? I'm not really familiar with them. I mean, looking at 10 years, 20 years? How far out do you look?
So typical planning horizon is 20 years from opening. So in general, we're looking at about like a 2050 end horizon.
All right. And then the second question, this sort of concept of social equity is sort of relatively new to me. And so I see it's a pretty big percentage of how you're deciding things. So how do you measure that? I'm just interested in how that works.
Yeah, it's a good question, and something as an engineer that sometimes trying to get my arms around it. But in practice, it's looking at really, are investments going towards disadvantaged communities, or are they going towards, previously opposite advantaged communities? So are we doing a good job of making the investments in areas that need the investment relative to areas that may have already received it? So that's and we're looking at, we can look at the census, and we're using primarily census tract data and population data to measure how we're, is this bike ped project in a disadvantaged community, or is it not in a disadvantaged community, as a way to screen the various improvements. And that tracks against some of the state's goals.
Thank you.
I'll just jump on top of Sasha's statement. That was pretty good for an engineer, Sasha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the MTC has identified these communities of concern within the Bay Area. So, we have identified kind of geography that we can that we are analyzing. And Sasha's right. We're looking at kind of the benefits to these communities versus the benefits outside of these communities. And, when it comes to a lot of these grant funded programs and state funded programs, they're going to award, more points potentially to, areas that have a higher percentage of disadvantaged communities. And Highway 4 just happens to touch several disadvantaged communities across the county, from the west, central and east parts of the counties. There's those communities all throughout. So it's actually a strong corridor in terms of being able to focus on the equity component and being rewarded for that in the funding potentially.
Okay, I see Patty, then Judd, then Claire. Patty, you want to go first? You're on mute, Patty.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Sasha, this is a very interesting project that you have. My concern is with the first map that you put up there. I finally think I see the black dotted line that is State Route 239. Is that true?
The black dotted line, I can show you. So,
Far east, just past Byron, you hit Vasco, and then it keeps going. It's a dotted line. Is that State Route 239?
So in the base map that I showed here, this.
Yeah. See
the
where the
red-
airport is? Yes,
Yep,
there
that
you
is,
go.
yep, that's 239, absolutely.
Yeah, yes, okay. I've been on this committee for 9 years now, in hopes that State Route 239 would become a reality because it's been on the books since 1959. How successful are we going to be with this project? And what foresight, what vision do you have that it's going to actually happen? Because we have our little road, Camino Diablo, which we have 21,000 cars on every day. Because State Route 4, the trucks don't want to stay on it. They want to, because if they're going to Alameda County, far east Alameda, and to San Joaquin County, they don't bother to take Highway 4. They go a little farther and they take Camino Diablo, and it's a problem. The road is really not meant for all those trucks, and it has a sign that says no trucks over 7 tons. However, how can you help us out with all that, and what is your projection on how you're going to solve this problem?
You're not going to like my answer very much. 239 is actually a little bit outside of, we've kind of, because it's its own project, we acknowledge its existence, and the fact that it's in a parallel planning effort. It's actually ahead of this project, but our project is not addressing the specific considerations or implementation of 239 as part of this vision study. So I hear you, and we well understand the challenges around 239, but it's not part of this project.
Thank you.
Okay, Judd. I think you were next.
Thank you. It's a good presentation. Thanks very much for this. I wanted to ask a question about the bicycling and pedestrian aspects of this multimodal corridor. Where would you envision bicycling and pedestrian activity to fit into the project? Clearly not right, well, I suppose not right on Route 4 itself.
Yeah, so it's a really important part of our study. Bicycling, pedestrian, and alternative modes really are central to this project. While it is called the State Route 4 Vision, we are looking at a band around Highway 4 that includes all of the arterials, includes things like the planned, the countywide bike plan, as well as the city bike plans. And where there are gaps in the system, we have noted those, and those are part of those 79 projects. And of the 87 projects that we've identified that are in existing plans that are relevant to our study area, 25 of them are active transportation, either pedestrian improvements or bike projects. And so some of the things are going to be like first and last mile connections. Trail gap closures. You have like a major gap in the bike network between Port Chicago and Willow Pass on Highway 4. And so that closing that gap is one of the things that will likely be an outcome of this project, or incorporated into the vision. That's my guess. We haven't done the analysis. I don't want to presuppose outcomes, but it would imagine it will score fairly highly. So does that answer your question, how we're going to be incorporating it? But you're right, bikes aren't, as of today, bikes are allowed on Highway 4 because of the gap. We don't want bikes on freeways. It's not a good place for bikes. So we're looking to improve and shift vehicular trips to active transportation to wherever possible.
Okay, thanks for your comments.
Great, thank you. Claire, did you put your hand down? Did that answer your questions?
I did. My only follow up with thanks, Jed, for bringing that up was I assume like crossovers might be part of the closing the gap picture.
In terms of pedestrian overcrossing,
Or undercrossing.
sure, yeah.
Okay.
Although the major one's under construction right now.
Right.
Right.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Michael and then Keith.
I think you're on mute, Michael.
Oh heavens, that works better if I take the mute button off. Sasha, appreciate the presentation, and engineer by training as well, so I feel your pain. Building on Chris's question, I was kind of a level up from his. Where do those criteria come from? Does the project team establish them? Are they established by the board? Are they part of the process from the state that you have to follow for funding, and they dictate those percentages? Just how are those even brought into the analysis?
So we had this. So the goals are driven by the CMCP guidelines. So the goal categories, the 7 categories, and I'm going to pull up that slide here.
Slide 5.
Yeah. All right, there you go. So the goal categories again are driven by the CMCP guidelines. The weighting and how we apply them, it does not provide you those guidelines. Frankly, the first step of it was our team and the consultant team, based upon how funding is allocated through various programs, came up with a first cut of it. We shared that with CCTA and the project team, vetted it through that project development team, and then part of how that weighting is ultimately done is part of this process that we're talking about right now. If there are, there's input on those things in terms of how we have weighted them, certainly that's part of what we're hoping to get feedback on, frankly.
I'm wondering who is ultimately the decision executive or decision board that would say, yes, we agree with your weightings, or we have a concern that safety is not weighted high enough, or efficiency and technology is rated too highly. Who's the ultimate decision maker on these are good and they shall be used versus the project team that has proposed them with merit, but who actually says, no, these are what you will use as your weighting?
I'm going to guess, and I'm going to turn to John and Matt. I'm going to start with a guess, and that is that the CCTA board ultimately, when they we're going to be taking these, and frankly, this presentation to the full CCTA board and looking for their thumbs up on as we use these criteria to screen our projects, and then ultimately the project itself and the vision study will be looking for the CCTA board to approve that study at the end. So.
Yes, Sasha. Yeah, Sasha, that's a good guess, but that's the obvious answer, is that ultimately this is a CCTA-led process, and ultimately not only the board, but from committees and partners that we present to, we want to hear the feedback. Again, this is a first attempt at weighing, and as you can see, the safety, mobility, and social equity, those are the 3 really heavily focused on areas in any funding that's available out there. So that's why that we have a little bit more weighting on those goals. But ultimately, your input tonight, and along with the other feedback that we hear, will go back to the team and see if we can change those if they really make a huge difference on the outcome. And ultimately, like Sasha mentioned, our board makes the final decision.
Yeah, I guess I'm not asking the question to nitpick what the weightings are, more what is the process. I could see that if this was not managed in an appropriate timing with the project decisions, that you could end up with recycle, because these were not agreed with those who ultimately say, we like these weightings, and then you end up choosing projects or prioritizing projects that don't quite match up to a weighting that gets changed later. So it's getting these done and vetted and locked in at the right time in the sequence of developing and prioritizing the individual project seems vital to me, and something that should really be overtly thought about in terms of, do we have these weightings by the ultimate decision makers? Do we have them? Do we have support for them? And make sure we have that support in a timely manner, so we don't have recycle of project priorities and project outcomes. My second, I do have a second, and I'm thinking about, in sympathy to Patty's input, where I appreciate the division that on the one hand has to happen when you've got a project team working on 239 and another project team working on Highway 4. But those two are not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of interaction between Highway 4 and 239. What sort of approaches can be used, like a coordination committee or something that would say these two acting in a vacuum could end up with some very perverse outcomes if we're not careful, and they really ought to be talking to each other. I know there needs to be division of labor, but there needs to be kibitzing between those two project teams, because we could have two suboptimal outcomes instead of one really good outcome. And I would just be curious, how much do we do that? What techniques do we use? Or is that something we should consider bringing into how we manage two significant pieces of work that have a significant interplay with each other? So just let John or you, Sasha, whomever, react to that.
I'm going to point to Matt.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. That is a great question. I was thinking of that as the question was being asked earlier. So, CCTA is actively managing both of these projects along with, corridor projects around the county. And so CCTA kind of acts as the liaison between all of these different efforts, because they do need to be coordinated. They're all interconnected. They just happen to be, for funding purposes and things like that, and environmental documents and things like that, have to get bifurcated into these, different corridors. But we're definitely talking to each other. We have, we hire, consultants to be actively, working across corridors. So if we're working on a certain issue in one corridor, that it's covered in all of our corridors. So we do have that kind of oversight going. While it doesn't always feel like it, because you hear about things individually, that they are being coordinated. And then certainly as you'll start hearing about our countywide transportation plan that we're kicking off soon, that's going to be looking at the county as a whole. So how do all these things, work together, as a system when everything's in place in the future. So yeah, we're trying to be mindful of that coordination.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for weighing in there, Keith.
Yes, I'm sure that a lot of the projects, just to go back on the bicycle and I guess pedestrian also, I know a lot of your frontage roads, arterial roads, you're looking at bicycle lanes and a multi-use path. But as a active bicyclist myself, I've ridden a lot of the roads along Highway 4, but since I live in Martinez, Franklin Canyon Road specifically. And how much is for like maintenance? I remember, but like about 18 months ago, 2 years, I had to like get a hold of Caltrans and the city of Martinez and Contra Costa County just to get some trees cut down because of the site level vehicles. The bicyclists couldn't even ride on the little bit of the shoulder that was there. And so are you looking at pavement conditions for cyclists and pedestrians to, obviously we're not going to go on Highway 4, but on the arterial roads, would you have a chance to use them? Is that part of the project?
We have not done a condition assessment as this study has not gone into the detail to look at particular pavement condition assessment as it affects the use and the use of those facilities. So I think the specific answer is no, we're not looking at that. I do hear your point though, and I'm sort of stumbling on my words because I'm thinking about how or how that could come into play. There are, most of our roads and throughout the county and within each jurisdiction, there are pavement condition assessments as well as pavement rehabilitation schedules for many of these types of projects that are a little bit outside of the kind of capital intensive work that we're anticipating here with new facilities, new infrastructure, expanded or modified infrastructure. I don't know if that totally answers your question.
Sasha, maybe we could, because we're working with Caltrans on this project, and Caltrans is is trying to have this kind of new approach to active transportation and accommodating them where they can. Maybe we point out that is an issue locally where there's, conditions, adjacent to the Caltrans right of way that creates safety issues on the arterials, and there should be a better way of dealing with that you don't have to go through a million different people, but it's through a coordinated effort within Caltrans. I'm stumbling as well, but I'm.
Yeah, I mean, Keith, it's a good point, and I understand what you're saying, because if a road is rutted out and is full of potholes,
also the trees too. Trees are an issue with visibility. And I also had a second question is, have you worked with Caltrans just for system management? Because system planning, because they also do quarter plans that are. I used to review them when I worked for Caltrans that are pretty intense. That they would deal with some of these issues too. They were getting into, because Caltrans approach is also multimodal for pedestrian bicyclists. Have you got a chance to look at their plans?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, we did, and we're working. They're actively part of our project development team at the technical level. We've received all of the relevant corridor plans that they have. We've reviewed those. We have incorporated them into our findings. And so, yes, that has very much been, it's been, 79 documents. It was a lot of documents to go through, and Sam has spent a good chunk of his spring reading those documents and pulling them out.
Thank you.
Great. Back to Patty and then back to Chris.
Thank you. I just want to thank Michael for supporting me and being sensitive about my concerns. And I usually don't say much at these meetings, but this is a real bone of contention for us who live in Byron and Discovery Bay and what we call the Far East. Because our State Route 239 is earmarked for federal money. So I know that there's federal money there. But so I think, and I think that you said, Sasha, that State Route 239 was a little higher on the priority list than yours. Is that, if that's correct, if I heard you correctly?
No, it's a little further along in it's quite a bit further along in the planning process.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Because the Byron MAC is very concerned because there's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And we had to really put our feet down and say, you cannot build what you call phase 1, because if you do, it's going to be even worse, which was going to be from Balfour to Camino Diablo. That was going to be phase 1. That was going to put absolutely everybody and an overpass for them to just come even, use our little road even more. So we hope that Francis Lowe did do this for us and made phase 2 our to be phase 1, which would go from Camino Diablo to the Byron Tracy Highway, which would literally take all that traffic off of our road. I hope that's still in the process. Thank you.
Great. Chris?
Yeah, Chris from Moraga. I guess real quick, if you're after feedback to the kind of the 7, the spread of those priorities, I think the first 4 adding to 70% seems kind of right to me. I commuted that corridor for 25 years but luckily I was going the other way and I went from Lafayette to Rio Vista. But I would think that mobility, just to send a message, should probably be at least slightly higher. I mean, there's a million ways to improve mobility. It's not just widening lanes and doing that, but I think that sends a message that it's a priority, because fortunately I don't commute into the Bay Area on that road, because it's a horror show every morning, I think, and then every evening going the other way. So that would be my 2 cents worth. I think it's minor, and I think it's more sending a message rather than really changing the weighting big time. So
Good input and good feedback.
Yeah, thanks. Before I ask a question, anybody else? So thanks, Sasha. Just to help me understand, when you put up, if you could pull back up the map too, of all like the connecting parts, 24 backs up coming east through the 680 change, but I believe, and Matt weigh in too, or John, the part of that, it comes from the 242 and the 4 interchanges. And it's not really that like 24 is backed up. It's that we can't get people off of 24 and on to 680 around the curve, because they're still stuck there in that, that's only like a 5-mile stretch at the most, up 680, and that backs up all the way to the tunnels. Is that correct? Is that coming from there? Did you learn about that? How does this plan affect all of that and it's like ripple effects?
So the specifics of our study does not, so you can see where our study limits for this corridor are, and it actually truncates south of Highway 4 along 242 and 680. So we're trying to look at those 2 interchanges as they affect Highway 4, but not looking at 242 or 680. However, there is a parallel effort taking place as part of the 680 project, and perhaps Matt would like to, I'll shut up and let Matt answer your question.
Yeah. So it is a good question. Basically, in the 680 study, we've come to the conclusion that the traffic that backs up 24 basically is originating at the Lawrence Main 680 on ramp. The massive amount of cars coming in at Lawrence North Main, and then the Treat merge is causing the traffic to really just back up all the way back on the 24. And so then what you're seeing on 680 north of there, the kind of around Monument, is, I think, Jared, what you said, is backing up from the Highway 4 corridor and down 242. So it's kind of 2 separate things, 2 separate congestion points. And that's the, kind of going over the Port Chicago, that merge there is causing that to ripple back.
So is this addressing that latter part of what you said?
Yeah. So the 680 effort should hopefully address the first one, but so there's a project called the SR4 Operational Improvements Project, the OIP, and that has a suite of projects kind of between Port Chicago and West and
Bailey.
Say Bailey, yes, that would seek to improve that congestion.
Okay,
And the projects that Matt is referring to have been considered or included in the work that we're talking about here.
got it. That's helpful just to understand how everything, connects and where it's impacted. And then let's talk about funding for this. This is great. I love doing studies, but studies only mean anything if we could actually implement that. So do we have funding for any of this implementation? Is this CCTA needs the extension of the sales tax? Do we need federal money? What do we currently have funding for?
Who wants to tackle that? Well, as Sasha mentioned, the reason we're doing this CPM, whatever that's called, Sasha, to meet the
CMCP.
Yeah, CMCP, sorry, yeah, is to align us up for future funding. That's the major criteria for being in the queue for looking for pursuing federal funds and other funding. So having that in place is the number one goal, which is up there with the other goals of the project. As far as funding, no, honestly, there's no Measure J funds. All the funds have been leveraged already, just to build all the projects that we built already. So we're constantly pursuing funding. This recent IIJA funding round for from the feds provided some opportunities there, but ultimately, right now, we really need to get this study completed so that it sets the stage for future funding.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. Are there any more committee members with comments, questions, or whatnot? Terry Ann, do we have any public comments, written or people in attendance?
Can you take down the slide?
Oh, yep, I sure can.
Thank you. There are no hands raised and we have no written public comment.
Awesome. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, John, for doing that. Also, before we go to the next thing, I just want to shout out to anybody who was actually responsible for fixing the major pothole on the 680 Ignacio off-ramp. I don't know if John and Matt, you personally got out there, maybe it was Colin because he lives down that way. But that happened during one of the storms, and every day for a month when you go over that, your whole car went boom, boom, and you couldn't avoid it. There's no space. So just thank you for everybody on the team or at Caltrans or whoever who filled that pothole fairly quickly for transportation work. All right. The next action item will be introduced by Matt Kelly. We have two reports coming up, I believe Hercules and Orinda. First up is Hercules. Matt, would you like to go through introduce them and their 2020 and 2021 growth management program checklist, compliance checklist?
Thank you, Chair Ash. So tonight, as just a reminder to the new members, we are in the middle of checklist season, so you'll be seeing a lot of these. Tonight, we've got representatives from City of Hercules and the City of Orinda, but we'll start with Hercules. And this is they're covering the calendar years of 2020 and 2021 for their growth management program compliance. And approval of this checklist will release their fiscal year 2020 and 2021 return to source funds. As just a reminder, that's 18% of Measure J that goes back to the jurisdictions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tim Rude. He is the Community Development Director, I believe is your title, Tim. And he's going to be presenting highlights from their checklist tonight. And so I'll hand it over to Tim.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to be here. Nice to meet all of you. I'm Tim Rood, Community Development Director for the City of Hercules. I've only been with the city for about a year, so this is my first trip through this process. I'll present some highlights of our activities as reported on the checklist, and then do my best to answer your questions. And I have a short presentation, which I'm going to bring up right now. Does that look correct, or do I need to do this?
Yeah, swap the view.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Now everything's not where I had it, but I'll do my best to muddle through. All right, so during the calendar year, the city of Hercules approved the Hilltown, or sorry, during calendar, the reporting period, the city of Hercules approved the Hilltown project mixed use development of 598 attached multifamily residential units, including 5% on-site affordable housing and 4,200 square feet of neighborhood commercial, with conditions required for consistency with the action plan. Move this over here. There we go. And the project is conditioned to provide bus facilities such as turnouts along San Pablo Avenue and dial-a-ride passenger pickup areas within the Hilltown development. And the number and locations of these will be determined in coordination with WestCat, our local transit provider. The applicant is also conditioned to provide 5% of the total number of residential units in each phase as moderate income affordable housing. Other major developments during the reporting period include these two buildings on the waterfront. In 2020, the Exchange at the top and behind me received certificates of occupancy. This is a mixed-use 4-story transit-oriented development for 172 multifamily apartments and 12,000 square feet of retail space with underground parking, supporting actions 3, 13, and 14 of the action plan. Hercules became an additional member of California Community Housing Agency in 2021. This is a joint powers authority focused on middle-income housing. And participation in CalCHA, as it's known, allowed Hercules to facilitate the purchase and sale of the Exchange to Catalyst Housing Group, which added the building to its partnership with CalCHA for the provision of additional middle-income rental housing, supporting Goal G of the action plan. The city, okay. I had the same paragraph twice in my notes, so I will not repeat it. And in terms of our RHNA allocation during the last reporting period, we did overperform overall in the number of units, but we had a deficit in the very low and low income housing, in part due to the inclusionary housing policies that many of our major developments have through their development agreements. Next, please. Oh, I'm doing this myself, sorry. All right. In terms of programs and policies, there's a summary here of the various plans and their last updates as required for the checklist. So our growth management element of the general plan and the circulation element of the general plan have been updated relatively recently within the past 5 years. The safety element updated in 2021. And the city is an ongoing participant and coordinator with the West Contra Costa Transportation Advisory Committee, or WCTAC, and the WCTAC-TAC, or Technical Advisory Committee, on a monthly basis. Despite our very small staff, Hercules has a much smaller team than most other cities of its size. So these duties are shared between myself and the Public Works Director primarily. One of the most exciting projects in Hercules is the Hercules Hub, and this is the planned Capitol Corridor rail station and potential ferry terminal out on the waterfront. It is really intended to be the centerpiece of the transit-oriented development and a regional model for integrating mixed income and mixed typology housing in a walkable and transit-friendly environment linked with high-quality transit that connects to job centers. So we have been working with the team over many years to implement phases of the hub. And this year have kind of ramped up our efforts to pursue funding to complete the design of the project. But to back up for a little bit, the hub location you can see here on this slide out on the waterfront near Hercules Point is at one end of a large portion of the central part of Hercules that remained undeveloped for many years. If you aren't familiar with it, Hercules was founded as a company town for the dynamite plant out on the waterfront, and then when that use was discontinued, portions of the city were developed largely as residential subdivisions, and the core of the city was the subject of a community visioning effort beginning in 2000 that envisioned a new urbanist model with walkable mixed-use development on the vacant and commercial sites based on traditional city building models. So this area was the subject of, I believe, the first form-based code adopted in the state, later codified into the zoning code. And this vision map here kind of illustrates the area. This is Highway 4 and Highway 80, or Interstate 80 at the center there, and the waterfront area to your left. And much of this area is now governed by a master plan called the Waterfront District Master Plan that governs the former Hercules Powder Company property of about 167 acres. And within that is a 42-acre project known as the Bayfront. So there are detailed form-based development standards for this entire Waterfront District Master Plan area. What you see in the photo, where you see the actual aerial photo, that's the part that was, well, actually now 2 more of these buildings have been built since this rendering was put together. So I'll go to the next slide. So this is sort of the current state of the improvements toward the Hercules Hub. The city's been working with regional partners on the progression to the Hercules Hub for over a decade now. The city completed 1,000 feet of trail connecting Railroad Avenue to the existing segment of the Bay Trail, which supports actions 5, 6, 27, and 39 of the action plan. And in 2020, the city completed the interim bus facilities at Bayfront. So this is bringing WestCat service to the Hercules Hub site, and we're very excited that that service began this week after some intense coordination between the city and WestCat to enable the interim improvements prior to the construction of the actual transit center. So that supports Goal A and Action 39 of the action plan. And then this diagram kind of shows the remaining improvements to actually get to the point where the train will stop. There are, of course, additional track work, including a potential for a third track for the UP to use to bypass Capitol Corridor, a pedestrian overcrossing to enable access to the platform, transit plaza and bus access, the station platform itself, future completion of the Bay Trail through the corridor, as opposed to the interim on-street improvements shown in yellow, and utility relocation, which is a big focus of the design effort right now, in that Shell and Kinder Morgan have fuel pipelines running through the area where the train tracks need to go. So those will have to be relocated. And then the pedestrian overcrossing to the station is envisioned as providing access out to the water side for access to a potential future ferry terminal, which we're also including in our funding requests, and is already, both of these projects are already in many of the regional transportation plans. This last slide shows the funding picture for completing the Hercules Hub to the point where the train can stop. Capitol Corridor, by the way, board has granted the station candidate station status, but the city needs over $100 million in order to actually complete the plan specifications and estimates. The first phase of the work is about $12 million. Then the actual work to do the right-of-way and utility relocations estimated at another 27 million. And then 67 million for the actual construction of the station. So we're working with a team that is helping us target the right funding sources, which are both, federal, state, regional, and local. And you can see the WICTAC funding there on the next to the bottom line that's anticipated to go toward the local match for all of these grants. And we've had some good news. The Hercules Hub was included in a joint TIRCIP, or Transit and Intercity Rail Corridor Program grant led by Capital Corridor. So we've received some initial funding that will help to keep the design effort moving while we wait to hear about the federal state partnership national grant from USDOT at the top. So hopefully we'll be able to continue the planning and engineering work, advance the design, coordinate with the Union Pacific Railroad and the utility providers, and bring the Hercules Hub to reality and help keep I-80 moving through providing multimodal access to rail, ferry, bus in a walkable and bikeable environment. That is my last slide. So I will do my best to answer your questions. And again, really appreciate the opportunity to be here and present this to you. Nice to meet you all.
Great. Tim, thank you for being here. Two points before I pass it to the group here. One, congratulations on that recent funding announcement. I mean, that is big news, and that hub will definitely help develop Hercules. So congratulations to you and everybody else who worked on that for a while. And the second thing to point out is we do not have a member of this committee from the city of Hercules. So your homework assignment is going to be to go help identify somebody of quality. We don't want anybody. But please find us a great person. I know Council Member Chris Kelly, who's on our board for CCTA's board, has been thinking it. But if you could talk to her maybe and help identify somebody, we would really appreciate that.
Sure. Does each city have a seat, or how does it work?
Matt? Or...
Each city gets one representative on the
committee. Great. Okay.
So Kent, you're up first.
Thanks for that presentation. I'm in Pinole, I'm your neighbor. I had a question. Can you bring up that slide? It was early on. It was titled Community Vision. That would help me.
Yeah, 1 second. Oh boy. Now, there's that. Yeah, I will be happy to bring that up. There's that, and now you're seeing a blank screen. So community vision.
Yeah, there it was. So I noticed that Hercules is kind of divided by Highway 80, and is the west side is getting more and more, the bay side is getting more and more developed, and there's more and more people. And I noticed within the last few years, I see more and more pedestrians, which is great, walking, trying to get from the west side where they're living on Sycamore. They're walking under I-80 to get to the commercial areas.
Yep.
But I noticed very few bikes, and I'm sure the reason is because it's that section of Sycamore is choked. And it's not the freeway that's the problem, it's the railroad. Like the columns, the big cement columns that support the railroad are right up to the road. So not only do you not have bike lanes, you don't have a shoulder. And it just seems like a critical passageway to connect the two sides of Hercules. And it's important that people be able to get between these two sides of Hercules without taking a car. But it looks like a really thorny problem because you're really constrained by the railroad bridge columns. And I wonder if there's conversations in Hercules about how to address that.
You bring up a great point, and I'm actually looking for another PowerPoint I have that has the details on our unsuccessful OBAG 3 application for that very project, which has been in our plans as well as most of the regional trail plans for a long time. It is a complicated project. We did advance the design a bit for the OBAG 3 application. And what it involves, I would love to find this picture, but I probably won't be able to in time. But you know that there's kind of a mound of dirt that people have to walk over right there to get, you know, from one side of the embankment to another. That would essentially be dug out and turned into a level trail with retaining walls, which is in, oh gosh, it's in a Southern Pacific easement within the Caltrans property. So you can only imagine the, you know, regulatory hurdles, coupled with an off-street pathway, multi-use trail, and where feasible, on-street bike lanes. So we do have a design for the gap closure project that provides for both peds and bikes, and you know, we do hope to continue to advance that project for funding. Absolutely. You zeroed in on exactly what the key connectivity issue is in Hercules. And all of our schools are located east of 80. So, you know, there is a massive rush of drive, you know, ideally wouldn't be as necessary as it is if we could. It's also a high injury corridor. San Pablo and Sycamore is our highest injury corridor, or I mean intersection.
Thanks for that. I'm glad to hear that Hercules is thinking about that. I just noticed yesterday that dirt pile that you're talking about, and I saw a path where people are doing whatever it takes to be able to walk or ride through there, and so they're making their own path over that dirt pile.
Yeah. They are.
Yeah.
It's certainly not accessible, and it's not, you know, desirable or appropriate. So we are well aware of that. It's been identified as a need for many years.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Good, Kent, to have that local knowledge. Any other questions on the group? I don't see any other hands up. Am I missing? Do we have, so I guess my question is, do you have any, what are your routes of regional significance? So what are the roads other than 80 that go through, that connect with Pinole and some of your other neighbors? If you could sort of those a little bit.
Well, San Pablo Avenue for sure is one. Matt, I may need to lean on you a bit here because this is not actually my area of expertise. You know, we have the two freeways, San Pablo Avenue.
I think Willow, yeah.
Yeah, so Willow Avenue, which has its own interchange at I-80 and forms the boundary between Hercules and Rodeo, which is an unincorporated community of concern.
So one of the big push we're making to cities, and I know there's the CCTA starting to work on lighting coordination with some of the cities, is we're really going to encourage you to meet with your neighbors on those two routes, and the county for the unincorporated, Pinole where it matters, and anyone else, and really say, hey, between now and the end of September, can you meet with your counterparts for those two areas and just discuss the traffic, right? Just by everybody, now that COVID's over, getting into the same room really helps facilitate where you're each going and how to deal with that commute, because that commute down San Pablo is not affecting just the people in Hercules, right? And your residents are affected by a decision that the Pinole traffic engineer is making. So I would really encourage you to, between now and the end of September, to, you know, to try to do that, sit down and connect.
Okay.
Carrie Ann, any public members, public comments, written people here?
No written public comment. And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, great. We appreciate that. I need a motion to move this forward. And since we don't have anybody from Hercules, maybe Kent, do you want to do the honors for your neighbor?
yeah, I move that we approve the Hercules Growth Management Plan Checklist for 2020, 2021.
Rosa Esquivel from El Cerrito seconds it.
Thank you, Rosa. Terry-Ann, can you please conduct a roll call vote and announce the outcome?
Yes, member Banker,
Yes.
member Bristow. Can you unmute?
Patty, unmute.
Okay, my answer is yes.
Thank you. Member Carr,
Yes.
member Esquivel,
Yes.
member Hammond,
Yes.
member Moriarty,
Approve.
member Saunders,
Yes.
member Wayne,
Yes.
Vice Chair Linder,
Yes.
Chair Ash.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously with members Chahal, Miller, Usana, and Vega absent.
Great. Thank you for your time, Tim. Really appreciate your work here tonight and everything going forward.
Thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate it.
All right. The next item will be also introduced by the famous legendary Matt Kelly and presented by the City of Orinda staff to review their calendar years 2020 and 2021 Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to get part two of the checklist presentation from City of Orinda. Just a couple of notes. One, it's interesting to have two cities of very like size. These are two of our smaller cities. So we're getting that perspective tonight after last week getting the Concord bigger city perspective. So also wanted to note that for City of Orinda, the packet had some references to older documents. We've posted a revised, or Terry-Ann will be posting revised versions, but it was mostly the labeling that was wrong. The actual documents contained were the right ones. Just some of the labels carried over that were incorrect. So just wanted to note that, but I have a couple of folks from the City of Orinda here tonight to present their checklist. I have representing the engineering side of the city, Siva Natarajan, and on the planning side, the planning director, Drummond Buckley. I'm going to pass it to Siva since he was the official submitter of the checklist, and let him kick off the City of Orinda's Growth Management Program checklist.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, Chair and members of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Thanks for having us here today. And I want to provide a brief overview of our checklist and just want to appreciate you spending time reviewing our submission. I have a small slide deck, so let me share my screen. Is everyone able to see it? Okay, great. Thank you. So, as Matt introduced us, my name is Siva Natarajan. I'm the city engineer for Orinda, and with me today I have our planning director, Drummond Buckley. Again, same like the previous presenter, I've been in this role only a little over a year, so it's relatively new. So I'll do my best to explain what my understanding of this present checklist is. The hope is to go over some information from the checklist, and then we are happy to answer any questions you may have. That for the 2020-2021 fiscal years, Orinda continued to participate in the regional committees. As a member of the Southwest Area Transportation Committee, or SWAT. For our region, SWAT is set up a little bit different from the other RTPCs within the county. It is made up of members from two subcommittees, LPMC and TBTC. because it's primarily separated by the Highway 24 corridor and 680 corridor. So in addition to SWAT, Orinda is also a member of the LPMC committee, which is the La Morinda Program Management Committee, and also the La Morinda Fee and Financing Authority, we call it the LFFA. In addition to this, Orinda staff also participates as a technical advisory committee staff for all the three committees that I mentioned above. So due to this setup, it puts us in a unique position where our action plan is collectively developed by our sub-region here, Lafayette, Moraga, and Orinda, and then it gets rolled up through SWAT into the CCTA and countywide action plans. In addition to it, lastly, Orinda is also part of the City and County Engineers Advisory Committee. So as part of the CCDS coordinating call for projects in 20 and 21, Orinda applied and received 2 grants, one for the Moraga Bay Pathway Safer to School project. This was completed, the construction work was completed last year, and we got some very good positive feedback from the neighbors, primarily because it helps school students to navigate through a very heavy traveled corridor. The other grant that we received was for the Camino Pablo Pathway Rehabilitation Project, which is planned for design this coming fiscal year, and the construction is planned for next summer, basically. Here are a few pictures from the Moraga Way Pathway project. And as you can see on the map on the left side, the markings on the red is the limits that this segment that was constructed last year. The one in the blue is the one that was done in a prior project, and cities slowly trying to continue developing this pathway throughout the stretch and getting connecting the school access, improving the school access a little bit. As you can see in this slide, the maintenance of effort requirement for Orinda was about $472,000, and between the expenditures, we have actually exceeded the MOE requirements. I just wanted to show a few project pictures from our annual pavement rehabilitation projects. These are partly funded using the Measure J funds. Orinda's general policy is to use our gas tax and Measure J return to source funds for our annual pavement rehabilitation projects. Currently, as of July 2022, Orinda's PCI is at 84, and we are ranked. I'm happy to say that we are ranked second in the Bay Area for pavement condition. The PCI was 49 back in 2014 and 15 period, which was considered to be in poor condition. Now we have, due to a couple of bond measures and regional local sales tax measures, we were able to raise the PCI to be in the good condition category. With that, I will hand it over to our planning director, Raman, to go over some development-related information.
Thank you, Siva. I just have a few slides here. So Orinda did not have any major development projects approved during the 2020 and 2021 reporting years. Keep in mind that this is based on building permits. We did have a 38-unit congregate care facility at One Wilder Road, approved memory care facility in January of 2021. But that's not showing up yet because building permits have still, even now, not been pulled. But as far as our numbers, we did do really well with accessory dwelling units. 9 ADUs in 2020 and 21 ADUs in 2021. And then, as you can see, 44 and 35 for single-family residences. Many of the single-family residences were in the Wilder subdivision, but there were some of those spread throughout the city. Next slide. So this just is showing the basically the numbers that I was just giving you in the context of our RENA allocation for our prior housing element. The RENA was 227 units total. And you can see with the 2 reporting years, not including 2022 and 2023, we were doing fairly well as far as meeting our RENA for market rate and moderate income. And then one more slide. So in 2020 and 2021, we were getting started on our downtown precise plan project, as well as sort of the early stages of our housing element. Both of those documents were approved on January 31st by the City Council, as well as the new safety element. And I'm very, very proud to say that Orinda's housing element was certified on March 30th. We were the 13th agency to get certification from HCD and the second in Contra Costa County. And I think even today, there's still only 2 jurisdictions that have certified housing elements in Contra Costa County. And I think it's also worth noting that the vast majority of cities that have gotten certified by HCD for their housing elements at this point are all much, much larger than Orinda. And then if you look at our demographics, it's particularly striking that a community like Orinda was able to get certified by HCD at this point. And I'll get off my soapbox, and Siva and I are both happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, congratulations, because I think a lot of other cities in the county are scratching their heads who submitted plans that met and exceeded those numbers, and have gotten denied or more questions back. So congratulations on you guys for doing that. And I know that certainly when you talk about a small town of what, 10-15,000 people, adding 1,300 housing units, you're adding 25%, maybe more of your population. So that's significant. Rosa, thank you for putting up your hand. Do you want to ask your questions?
Yes, congratulations on getting the approval, but I did pay attention. So my question is, how many total units are you guys projecting to add in terms of just housing units? How many additional units, and what's the percentage in terms of the existing?
So we have about 6,500 households in Orinda currently, and we are meeting our RENA 1,359 units plus a very small buffer of about 5 units. The reason that our buffer is so small is there was a major site that was in our housing element that the City Council supported very much, as well as city staff, that did not, that is still in the housing element, but at the end, HCD said they would not count it toward our RENA. So, and that site, I believe, accounted for 200 units. So we're still going to try to get that site entitled. It's a site that's owned by Caltrans, and there's a decertification process that needs to be gone through. But anyways, even without that, we are still meeting our RENA, which is 1,359 units. And like I say, I think there's about a 5-unit buffer.
Thank you very much. That answered my question, and it sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, and sorry I had to step away there. Hopefully nobody could hear me talking to my 3-year-old who's very demanding of daddy's time. Claire and then Chris.
Hi, this is Claire from Concord. I had a couple questions about the low and very low section of your RENA. If I'm reading page 85, table B of the packet, it looks like there hasn't been anything since 2015. But then if going down further into the materials, there's a section about the Grove, which is, I think, over 100 units. No, sorry, 41 units, which is low income housing. So my question is, maybe I'm not reading this right, but it seems like the 2015 number for low or very low should be higher. And then my second question is, do you have anything on the horizon for low and very low housing, more moderate income type housing?
So I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed to say I don't have the packet printed out in front of me, and I don't have it as a PDF, so I can't speak directly to the page number or the part of the table that you're talking about. I can tell you that in 2014, 2015, the Monte Verde project in Orinda was approved, got a building permit around that time. And that is a 68 unit low and very low income senior housing project. So the numbers that you're mentioning actually seem a little bit higher. It makes me wonder. I really can't speak to it without seeing it directly.
Seeing it. No, I understand. I was actually not Monte Verde, but Orinda Grove. And
Well, Orinda Grove has 8 affordable units. It's a market rate project that has 8 units that I believe were included by the developer as a density bonus. And those are deed restricted units that are moderate and low income. And that's an ownership project.
Oh, okay. It just seemed like it should boost.
But it's the numbers you were saying for low income, it's nothing near that. It's mostly a market rate subdivision with like I say, a total of 8 affordable units, of which I think only 2 or 3 might be low affordable to low income.
Oh, okay. Okay. I see. Thanks for clarifying. And then
as far as projects on the horizon, I do have something kind of exciting to report. In August of last year, the City Council approved a 52 unit mixed income. It's got, I think, maybe 15, 20 moderate, no, not 20, like maybe about 14 moderate units, and then the rest are low and very low senior housing project that's sponsored by the Orinda Senior Housing Foundation, which owns another or operates another senior affordable housing community in Orinda. And the developer or the applicant is actively working to pull building permits, I think, probably this year.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
From your neighbor, Chris in Moraga.
Hi there. A couple questions. So one of them I think is more just, I'm relatively new to this and just trying to understand. So the ADU numbers are small, but they add up. Does any of that kind of qualify as lower incomes? Because I certainly see people that could rent out an ADU, to a single mom that's maybe got 1 kid, or a senior who wants to live in the area but doesn't have the maybe as much income. So does any of that count, and are you able to track any of that, or is it all just sort of private and disappears?
So it's HCD allows agencies to count ADUs toward their moderate income, not toward their low income, not typically toward their low income. You have to demonstrate that that on average, the ADUs that are being rented are being rented at affordable levels. So you have to do a little bit of math, and that's part of the housing element. And then as far as being able to get credit for those units in your housing element, what HCD does is they look at the development of ADUs in the prior cycle and sort of average that out, and then allow you to look to calculate forward with that same average number per year for the 8-year cycle of the next housing element. So, so that's kind of how that works. So for Orinda, it was helpful that our numbers were quite high. I mean, 21 units for a community of our size is pretty good. So we were able to, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think it was about maybe 11 or 12 per year on average moving forward, count toward our modern income RHNA numbers.
No, I think they're good. Is it pretty hard to get that kind of rental information, or
no,
is it part of the approval process?
It's not that was not one of the difficult things of the housing element at all.
Okay. And then just one last kind of question for you. It may be a little bit more difficult to answer, but kind of seconding Jared's comments about, cities working together, certainly depending on what newspaper you read, Moraga and Lafayette or Moraga and Orinda are at odds over traffic on our very important corridors. Are you comfortable that the cities are working sort of as well as they can, or is there room for improvement in the LPMC and LFFFA, which I don't really know much about, but I heard about it and I'm going to kind of try and study a bit better. But do you kind of give it a B, an A, a C? How do you feel about the interaction?
So I'm going to defer to the city engineer for that question. He is much more involved with the transportation stuff. So
yeah, I can speak for that. So yeah, the LPMC committee puts us, at least Lafayette, Moraga, and Orinda, very in a close circuit, and we coordinate quite a bit on many different things, particularly like the recent action plan update. So most of last year was focused on that, and Camino Pablo and Moraga Way are designated routes of regional significance. So there was quite a bit of coordination between Moraga and Orinda on that aspect. Same as that, Moraga Road and Mount Diablo Boulevard, Pleasant Hill Boulevard, all those got Lafayette and Moraga into coordination mode. So we do quite a bit of stuff together, and we also coordinate with implementing projects. So there are some pavement projects in the past where we have set up separate agreements to combine projects together to get cost benefits from doing larger projects than going with a smaller one out to bid. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
So do you rate it as good, or could
I would say our relationship is very good. Yeah, I would give it an A. We work very well together, all three agencies, definitely.
Okay. That's I've heard that from other people, so that's good to hear.
We like to hear that, and that's why you hear us encouraging other cities, to be doing the same thing, because clearly you find it worth those conversations. So thank you for doing that. Bill?
Yes, thank you. So over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of infill projects done across the county. And right now there's a lot of pressure from the state to develop what little land, open land is still out there within our communities. And so I'm just curious, in your housing element, what amount of land has been identified for potential future infill projects?
So the vast majority of our sites were infill sites to meet our RHNA number, because that's all we have. I mean, we don't. There is a lot of open space around Orinda, but most of that is actually outside the city limits and is owned by East Bay Mud. So that's not on the table whatsoever. So we had to get to do a combination of rezoning within our downtown, our developed non-vacant sites within our downtown. And we had to do a lot of different economic studies to demonstrate to HCD that it was realistic if those sites were rezoned at the levels that we have proposed in the housing element, that it was realistic that those sites could be redeveloped over the housing element cycle. And then on top of that, we included a number of churches on Moraga Way that have large parking lots and basically own a lot of land in addition to the church, where that would make it possible to develop housing as well as continue to operate the churches. I think there's 3 or 4 sites on Moraga Way. And then finally, we also rezoned 11 acres that are part of Miramonte High School, but completely undeveloped. And so sort of between those things, we were able to make the numbers work. There were very few vacant sites among all of that. I mean, you might consider the Miramonte site vacant. I believe it is a separate parcel, even though it's part of the high school. The largest vacant site that we included was the Caltrans site that I mentioned. It's located at the corner of Wilder Road and Highway 24. It's 10 acres. It's, we believe, well suited to development. It's not used for anything now. It was probably purchased for a cloverleaf that was never built. There was a cloverleaf that was graded for the site that we can see on aerial photographs from the 1960s. But there is a very complicated process that you need to go through to decertify that, to get for Caltrans to make it available for development. And that process does not have a certain outcome and takes a long time. There's the governor's order regarding excess land, which we looked into, and we talked to the governor's office about that. But we weren't able to make enough headway to prove to HCD that to a level of comfort that they would accept that site. So like I say, it's in our housing element, but it's not counting toward our RHNA.
That's great information. Thank you for sharing. I have just a quick follow-up question on that, because you mentioned that it did require some rezoning. Was there any retail areas that were rezoned?
Yes, all of our downtown. Our downtown is comprised mostly of downtown commercial, which requires retail on the ground floor, plus downtown office at the periphery, which does not require retail on the ground floor. We did not change the ground floor retail requirement. All we did was rezone sites, certain sites to allow. So right now in the downtown commercial, 10 units to the acre is allowed, and we changed that to between 25 and I think the highest was maybe 50 units to the acre, but we maintained that ground requirement for ground floor retail.
That's fantastic. So in those sites, are those considered mixed use then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Any other member comments, questions? Do we have, Terry Ann, do we have any written or public comments, or anybody from the public here?
No written public comment, and it looks like there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you, folks from Moraga. With that,
Orinda.
Sorry, I'm getting tired, I guess. All right,
You're fine.
Arinda. Thank you, Arinda. Do we have an Arinda? Is our Arinda member here tonight? Yeah, there he is, Judd. Thank you. I knew you were around earlier. Okay. You just moved boxes for me. So Judd, do you want to go ahead and make any particular motion for us?
I would like to move to approve the plan, the
And
I'll
checklist.
second that.
Bill, thank you. So we've got that. And Terry Ann, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Yes, member Banker,
Yes.
member Bristow,
Yes.
thank you. Member Carr,
Yes.
member Esquivel,
Yes.
member Hammond,
Yes.
member Moriarty,
Approve?
member Saunders,
Yes.
member Wayne,
Yes.
vice chair Linder,
Yes.
chair Ash.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously with members Chahal, Miller, Osana, and Vega absent.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our regular agenda items. Does anyone have any summary to report on CCTA meetings held in May? Matt, anything there? Terry Ann, any updates to the meeting in person thing?
Just that we have approval for remote meetings through June, so the next meeting will be remote. At the June Authority Board meeting, I see member Hammond's thumbs up. At the June Authority Board meeting, we'll be making that decision for July. There was some legislative bills that we were following, and it doesn't sound like they have legs anymore. So those, I'm not aware right now of any legislative pieces out there that will allow us to continue past December. But as long as the Contra Costa Health Services guidance does not change, which it was last updated on March 27th, we can continue to meet remotely through the end of the year, but it all is determined upon that guidance, and it could change at any time.
Okay. Matt, any announcements before I go to Rosa?
Nope.
Rosa?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to respond to we received a public critique in the last meeting. I think it's in the minutes. And I don't recall exactly what the public comment was. There was something about misspending funds on driverless cars for, is that what the comment was? So if there was, I just want to point out that we have received comments from the public. And if you read the comment from the last meeting minutes of last month, I think they were just criticizing, I think they were saying we're wasting funds, public funds. And I think there's no benefit to the public. And so I just wanted to make a comment, and maybe to the person in charge of the project, it's an interesting comment. And I'm wondering if the technology is used for public transit. So maybe that would be the benefit to the public, because public transit agencies, they're public. So would that technology or the lessons learned from that help out with public ridership? So that's my comment.
And thanks, Member Esquivel. We can actually provide this committee an update on the automated driving system and our other kind of innovation, and technology, mobility options we're working on, so you guys can actually, ask those types of questions of the team working on it. So I think we did that a couple of years ago. We'll bring it back to this group again later this year.
And
thank you. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for that, Matt. And I also know you were working on a field trip for us out to Gomentum.
Yeah, Terry Ann, let's bug the folks we need to bug. Yeah, we'll work on that.
Date is still to be determined. But it is on our list.
It's on our list.
Thank you all for that. And Rosa, that was a great thing to bring back up. It's important for us to make sure we have all the information, because there are reasons that these tests go on and money is spent, but it's good for us to have all of that information. So I appreciate that. Any other members, staff with comments?
I'm almost done. Give me one more minute.
Okay, if Patty, did you have something there? If anyone from the public is here, no? Correspondence and communications on the agenda. The authority press release, I think that was in the packet. Future agenda items that anybody would like to hear. Okay. If anyone from the public, anybody from the public still here? Could raise your hand. Okay. That concludes our meeting. This meeting is adjourned at 7:50 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your time and patience tonight, and thank you for the cities for being here.